So, on today's podcast, we're going to take a trip down memory lane back to 2008, when my first book and really the step back from the baggage claim movement began and shifted the path forward for all that's happened in my life and work since. And so we're going to return to the origin story for this journey and reflect on the lessons learned along the way and what still remains true with me today. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We are in season 9, 270 or so episodes by now. Amazing this continues to grow, spread the way that it has. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. I invite you to go back, check out all the great episodes that we have before. You can Google my name, topics around leadership culture that are interesting to you. And chances are you're going to come up with a lot of episodes on some micropods that hopefully resonate with you and meet you where you are and what you're looking for. There are also so many great chats that I've had with other friends and thought leaders and folks from around. So I hope you go back and check those out as well. So much great stuff. If you are one of the folks that have been with us from the very beginning, so glad that this continues to add value to your life and your work, and so glad you are here. My commitment to everyone, every time I record one of these podcasts, I want to remind myself that the whole purpose of this is I want this to be a place for you to step back, to have a few minutes in your day, in your life, in your work, to just kind of step back, to think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work, and then have a little bit of good oxygen breathed into you so that you can think about whatever those next things are along your path. And it's helpful to me. It's helpful to you to think about these things. And I hope we're just kind of going through the journey together. So thanks for being here. Before we dive into today's topic, if you'll do me the quick favor, if you will do a couple of things to help promote these messages in the podcast, if you'll rate the podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're on, the podcast as a whole, if you'll rate it that, if there are individual episodes that resonate with you, those are all the ways in which this helps, amplify these messages. Also, if you leave an authentic review in your own words of why you think these topics are important in the world, that helps the algorithms work and people find it. And then obviously, every time you share the podcast on social media, if there's episodes that really resonate with you, hey, give it a listen. This is why it resonated with me. Or if you're sharing that within your team, your colleague, people in your life saying, hey, let's listen to this episode and talk about it. Those are ways in which help amplify these messages. And I appreciate anybody that takes the moment to do that because that helps these messages reach further. And that's the whole idea. So thank you so much. I want to put good stuff out into the world. Thanks for everybody that does that. I'm often asked, how did you get into doing what you do professionally? And they always ask it in such a way, they're looking at me like, how did you get into this? I know what I do is not exactly the most conventional job that most people have. And so they're looking at you and they're like, wait, how did you even get into doing this? How did this become your profession, this writing books and speaking and consulting with organizations around leadership and culture and this clarity around mission, vision, values? How do you even get into that? How does this even begin? And I understand that because in some ways, it's interesting for me to reflect back on how did all this happen and what was it? And so today's episode, I'm going to share, some kind of reflections on all this. But the simple answer to that question is, how did I get into all this? The first place that my mind goes is I was fortunate to have many experiences in my life that have prepared me and helped me think in all these ways that you hear me talking about. I had, a great family. I had great friends, great mentors around me, people that helped me see the world and think differently. I was a college athlete, and the time, for me to learn more about being on a team and being a good teammate and the vital role that leadership and culture plays in success or in teams that get stuck in mediocrity. I got to watch that and experience and play with that. And I was fascinated by watching that and studying it and learning from it. And then I think about post-college. I thank God for the 10 years that post-college that I got to be in a role where I was, a camp director. I was leading Camp Akita, a summer camp for nearly 2,000 participants in a summer. We're growing and molding a staff of, a college staff, and being a part of the experiences of creating culture with the people around us. I think about the experiences I was lucky to have in leading over 1,700 people to construct about 125 houses internationally for families living in poverty in Mexico and the Dominican Republic. I was fortunate to be in a position where I could dream up and begin a project where we were serving the homeless living outside of the shelter system in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. And so those experiences, the opportunities and the people I was lucky to be with along the way and to learn from and grow from over that 10-year period post-college, all of those things played a role in helping to shape the person that I am today. And I could go on and on and on about my early childhood and the way that my family shaped with experiences and seeing the world and thinking differently about things. I could go on and on about all of that. And certainly could, but even, after this monologue I just gave that I could, again, spend a whole podcast diving even deeper into, but I'll spare you for today. But most people then still look at me and they usually ask, but still, let me get specific. How did you begin writing or a book? And how did all of this translate into your professional life as a speaker and consultant? And they're looking at you like, kind of, what happened? So on today's podcast, we're going to take a trip down memory lane back to 2008 when my first book and really the step back from the baggage claim movement began and shifted the path forward for all that's happened in my life and work since. And so we're going to return to the origin story for this journey and reflect on the lessons learned along the way and what still remains true with me today. But before we dive into today's episode, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I know that my professional life has not been has been quite interesting to many people and or not the traditional path. And in many ways, it's hard for me to even explain kind of how it all happened and what happened. But it is fun to step back every once in a while. I probably don't do this enough and reflect on all of the experiences and things and decisions along the way that helped shape kind of what I'm experiencing today and where things are. And so I'm attempting to do that in short form today as a part of this podcast. And hopefully I did a good job in the opening to relay the message that I'm grateful for the experiences, learnings, and people that helped support me, shape me, and gave me opportunities to ask bigger questions and think bigger about my life and the path forward. I'll always be grateful for that. And all of it led to the point where I was able, ready, and courageous enough, I think, to step out of a job that I loved and was very grateful for at the time, and had been doing for 10 years. And so I was really grateful for that. But I knew there was not a really next spot in that current organization and so I needed to be open to a new path that may emerge. And that I knew that emerging path was ambiguous. And so that could be scaring to some people, and certainly to me at times, but it was also exciting. And it was daunting at times, but it was also inspiring to me. And so I had made the decision that I was going to attempt to write a book. And so, now for context, let me explain what was happening at that time. Again, a part of the origin story, at least at the beginning of this writing, speaking, consulting side of my life. That for context, in 2008, our country was in a recession, and not exactly the time that most people would suggest that you quit your job and, where you have no income and your wife is on maternity leave. And so, we weren't being reckless, but we had no income coming in. We'd been modest. We hadn't been making much money at all in our jobs to that point in our career, but we had been smart with saving and being intentional to allow us to take some time to kind of figure things out without panicking. But most people look back at that time, and it would not be a time that you suggest quitting your job and begin an ambiguous journey when you have a wife and 2 young kids at the time, which we now have 3. But that's when you know you married the right person, because as I pitched this crazy idea of attempting to write a book, my Amy said, "Good, you should." That was her first response. And then she said, go do it. And she's been a constant and wonderful presence, supportive presence ever since in anything that I've done, and really believed in me before she even knew what it was and before I even knew what it was. So the concept of the book, caught many people off guard, especially as I began to say, okay, I'm beginning to try to write this book. And of course, I'd never done it before. I had no idea if I could even do it, or that whether anybody would care and that it would ever lead to anything. But I was going to attempt to write a book. And the concept of it caught many people off guard, because it wasn't just writing a book. I was going to go sleep in 7 different airports across the country over the course of 7 days, and watch the way people are moving throughout the world. And so this concept, 7 cities in 7 days, I went from Columbus to Boston to Miami to Chicago to Minneapolis to Seattle to San Diego, all without leaving the airport. And all at, the goal of writing this book, step back from the baggage claim, change the world, start at the airport. And it was a concept at this point. And so I was going to dive into the airports in these 7 cities in 7 days, and I was sleeping in uncomfortable places, and I was not, I wasn't sleeping much at all either. I was only spending $20 a day because I didn't have a job, and so I was budgeting myself very carefully, which does not go far in airports, as you know. And in fact, in the back of the book, I track all the expenses. If you want to check out what I actually spent and how much I slept and all that, it's all in the back of the book. And I was there, just reflecting on this journey of air travel as a metaphor for our lives and how we move throughout the world each day. So the book isn't about airports, but it is a metaphor for life, for work, for how we approach obstacles, cancellations, and delays. And it uses airport images and experiences to ask bigger questions about how we choose to move in the world and the difference it makes on ourselves, but also on the other people around us. And so the central image of the book and the title of the book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim, begins at the baggage claim. And if you've ever been to a really crowded baggage claim, then you know that experience of, the buzzer thing goes off, which still have no idea why the thing is the best thing we've ever come up with to symbolize that the bags are coming out. But as soon as they do, what ends up happening, and I watched this over the course of 7 days in 7 different cities in all different airports, the same thing happened, but people bum rush up to the baggage carousel. They form what I call the human wall of entitlement, where we put our shins up against the cold metal carousel and we form this wall so that nobody can actually see the bags. And I'm in more of a hurry than you are, and my bag's more important, and the jockeying for position begins. And I watched this in every single airport, and I just kept thinking about, what if we could step back from the baggage claim to see from a new angle, to think about the culture that we're creating with the people around us, and that we all play a role in the creation of that space. And instead of only worrying about, I'm in more of a hurry than you and my bag's more important than yours, what if we actually helped each other and moved more gracefully? And perhaps it would actually even produce a better experience for all of us and those around us. But more specifically, there probably is a better way to do this, too, of collecting our bags and doing this in a more efficient and effective manner, too. So the outcome would be better and the experience of it would be better. And yet we all play a role in creating that environment. And so I won't go into all the intricacies of the book on this podcast, but for the sake of this kind of reflection and this kind of going back to the origin story for how this spirit began, but then also carries with me today, I will reflect on some lessons learned along the way that are true today. I think about them almost literally daily and are still alive as a part of this journey. Now that from Step Back from the Baggage Claim, I've written other books. So then I wrote the book Remember, and then I wrote the book Thermostat Cultures, and then I wrote the book Breathing Oxygen, and certainly the speeches, countless number of speeches and workshops and retreats, and then consulting with teams and organizations over a longer period of time to help them with the development of their people and culture. All of those things continue today, and I think about this, it's still foundational for what I'm doing today. And so some of those key themes that I reflect on are, the first is step back. This idea of stepping back from that swirling baggage claim resonated with people around the world. I was so fortunate when it first came out that it was highlighted by the New York Times on 2 different occasions. This image of the baggage claim just instantly connected with so many people because they could just, oh yeah, I've been there. I get it. I understand this idea. But this idea of not just the baggage claim, but kind of stepping back is what truly mattered. And so still today in my own life, and certainly in the teams and organizations I support, in a fast-moving and often chaotic world, our best leadership and clarity of our actions are best discovered when we step back. In fact, the kind of tagline from my consulting company, Step Back Leadership Consulting, is step back to move forward. That often we think that it's just about getting ahead and getting that next thing and moving, this constant activity. And yet the practice of stepping back and getting more clear on those and more intentional about our efforts is what makes us move forward. It makes our efforts actually more effective and efficient and better. And so this idea of stepping back really connected with people. What I reflect on this, at the heart of this was about human connections. And so much of that, the step back from the baggage claim experience, what it really did is reminded us all again about is the power of the human connections that are right around us. And instead of just random strangers that are crossing paths with, they are people. And we are better at everything we do when we are aware and care about the people that are around us. And when I think about that now in terms of team and organizational settings, those types of leaders and cultures, that actually are aware and care for people and are intentional about the experience others are having, they tend to produce higher performance metrics as well. And so the positive outcomes of their efforts are followed by that kind of human-centered leadership and human-centered culture that the metrics actually follow. I think about and reflect on one of the main messages around obstacles, delays, and cancellations are just a part of the journey. Obviously, they are when we're traveling in airports. There are constant obstacles, delays, and cancellations that are happening. But as a metaphor for our lives and our work, all journeys and adventures do not go smoothly. In our personal lives, in our work lives, obstacles, delays, and cancellations always exist. But it's how we respond to that adversity that arises. The adversity always comes at some point, that it's our response to those things that often dictates the next path of our journey. And if the first reaction is to freak out and yell at the person at the gate, or the person that really has no bearing on the decision but is there as the messenger, that impacts the response. And yet if we chose to do it differently, what would that have? And so the best leaders, teams, and organizations not only know this, but they actively practice it. They coach it. And I'm fortunate to help support the intentional development of people and cultures that prepare for this, that when things don't go our way, how is it that we respond in a way that reflects the kind of values that we want for this team or this organization? And so, as I reflect on this whole journey that's led to this point, again, it comes back, and then I can hear the question again from people. But how did you know this could become your job? Is often a question people ask me. And as I reflect on this journey and this origin story, and how did you know this could become your job, I'll just quickly say I didn't. And in fact, I wasn't focused on creating a job. I was focused on creating a movement of spirit and connection. I was focused on telling a story and a message that hopefully resonated with people, because it resonated with me. And hopefully there were others that it might resonate with. And I figured that if it was moving, if it was inspiring, if it was meaningful enough to people, doors and opportunities would open. And every step along the way, I figured if you add value and you contribute to something, there will be new opportunities and an ability to help. And that stays true today. I think about the quote at that back in the origin, when all this was being created, and before I knew anything, this would lead to anything, that I had a big quote up on my dry erase board in my office. That I wrote a quote from the poet Eugene Ware that said, "All glory comes from daring to begin." All glory comes from daring to begin. And as I reflected on that, not only then, but still today, you realize that daring to begin is not a one-time thing. It's not a one-time dare. I had to dare to begin to okay, I'm going to go to the airports. But the reality is then I had to dare again. Was I going to stay there? Was I going to dare to write? Was I going to dare to try to open up and tell this story? Was I going to dare then to even share it with anybody? Was I going to dare to then show up to places where nobody knew who the hell I was or cared, and be willing to put myself out there and share it? And so daring to begin is not a one-time dare, but I put the focus on the spirit of the work, the craft, and then learning and developing and listening to what adds value and what supports others along the way. And that's still true today, and that's still the way that I think about whenever I write something, speak, consult, or with a new company. It's all about this spirit of, hold on, let me try to listen, and where are those opportunities to help support and add value, and to dare then to begin again. And so, lastly, I'll just point out a reflection about this journey from the origin story is that intentions plus action. It had to have intentions plus action. You can have the greatest intentions in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, it won't happen. We all know that. You can have the greatest strategic plan on planet Earth, but if you don't act on it and bring it to life, it's really just a daydream. The step back from the baggage claim journey taught me and continues to teach me and serve me today that after we step back to gain this powerful perspective and get clear on how we want to travel, we then have to have the courage to go take the first step and step forward to collect our bags in different ways and to show that there's a new way forward that for us personally and us collectively, we can do this differently. That it reminds us that with our intentions plus our actions, that we are ambassadors for the life and cultures that we want to create together. We have to be the first person willing to step forward to them and to create them. And so I'm grateful for that amazing journey to begin my young career. And nearly 17 years later, which is amazingly hard to believe, but that I'm grateful that that spirit, those reflections, those lessons and teachings stay with me today. So as I reflect on this origin story, as always, I'll share a couple of questions with you. How do you need to step back from the baggage claim right now in your own life or work? What needs a little bit of a step back for perspective for you? How do you and those around you want to travel together next? In your life or in your work, how is it that you want to travel together? And what type of people and cultures do you want to help create to be that ambassador for that team or that culture that you want to create? And I'll just remind you to remember that daring to begin is not a one-time dare. That each day we wake up with the opportunity to dare to begin again today. So I hope today's episode got you thinking in some good ways, and I hope it took you down memory lane. It certainly did me, and I hope that the reflections make you think about your own life and what's next along your path. Cheers to you. Cheers to all of us. And, I appreciate you taking this moment to go down memory lane with me. If you have any thoughts, feedback, ideas, if there's any ways that we can support you in your own development of your people, your culture, your team, I hope you'll track us down. Email info@jasonvbarger.com. You can go directly to the website, jasonvbarger.com, or you can find us on social media @jasonvbarger. And if we can support you, your team, your organization, or that development, please reach out and we'll help you in any way that we possibly can. Lastly, I'll just say thanks again for anybody that rates the podcast 5 stars, reviews it in your own words, and shares it with other people. This helps amplify the messages even further. And I'll just remind us lastly to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.